tired. I haven't got much sleep this week. Okay, right, the recording started. Hopefully you can see that slide. Okay, so for the new people here, just very briefly, I am an accredited peaceful parent coach. I trained with Dr. Laura Markham and have done lots of further training in ADHD and autism. So I've sort of specialised in that area. The sort of theme that brings everything that I do together is ADHD, but of course it doesn't travel alone. So if you or your children have other neurodivergent conditions as well, then I absolutely work with that. But ADHD is kind of what my clients have in common with each other. Okay, and I'm today, and well, this whole challenge has been sort of based around my Growing Extraordinary Humans framework, which is the framework that I've created to support neurodivergent families. The program I'll be talking about at the end of this, that I've got these 3 spots for, is based around those 3 pillars. I've got a course which I've created around those pillars, and on Monday we talked about roots, and I gave you a little taste of the kind of stuff we touch on in that. Yesterday we talked about nurture, and I gave you a little taste about what you kind of get within that. And then today we're talking about space, which you'll get a taste of today. So this is the kind of the framework. So as you can see, there's lots of different components to it, and as you work around it, you learn about yourself and your children and create strategies that work for you and your family, because I don't believe there is a one size fits all. I don't believe that you can read a book and go, okay, yeah, that's how I'm going to do it and it's going to work. I think we need to understand a little bit deeper about our own kids and ourselves and do a bit of work behind the scenes to figure out what's going to work for our family. And that's where the sort of one-to-one work can be super helpful. So today we're going to cover parenting styles. So the different types of parenting styles that are there, and the one I recommend and why. And then we're going to talk about setting effective limits and how we can do that. So the different parenting styles that we've got, the risk that we sort of have when we're trying to have a parenting style which is different from the way that we were raised. So we've got permissive in the top left. So if you look at the support and the expectations, so low support is, the down arrow is pointing to down, so that's clear, and then at the top that's high support, and then along the top we've got expectations. So low would be on the left hand side and high would be on the right hand side. So where we have low support, so we're not giving much support to our kids, and we've got low expectations of our kids, we might call that style of parenting uninvolved, sometimes neglectful. It's kind of the type of parenting where you sort of aren't really giving it much thought. You're either sort of handing it over to somebody else to do for you, or you're just not really engaged in it. Obviously that's none of you here, because you're all here, so you are clearly involved. And actually, I don't think you can really get away with being uninvolved if you have a neurodivergent child. Then we move to, if we sort of work around anti-clockwise around this square, we've got authoritarian. So with that, the support that the child is given is low, but the expectations are high. So this is the type of parenting that is pretty common, very common, certainly when a lot of us would have been growing up. We use bribes and punishments to try and get our kids to do what we want them to do. We expect them to do well, but we don't give them support. So it's a tough place for a neurodivergent kid to be raised from. We may, if we've been raised, we're neurodivergent ourselves and we were raised in that way, we may hold a lot of shame. We may feel like we've never quite lived up to the expectations of our parents, that we're not good enough. And that can cause quite a lot of pain and challenge for us as we go through life. And it can also affect our parenting as we become parents, and we we typically sort of parent the way that we were parented. That tends to be our default. And it can be quite hard to find a different way. And then we move to the top right. This is where you have high expectations of your child and high support. And we call that authoritative parenting. We also could call it peaceful parenting, gentle parenting, responsive parenting. There's lots of different terms for this, but this is the kind of parenting that I suggest you aim for. So this is where we're giving our kids lots of support, but we're also holding high expectations for them. And those expectations are going to look very different depending on who your child is. And it's worth bearing in mind that if you've got an ADHD child, your expectations of your child will need to sort of be flexible, because sometimes with ADHD you can do something and sometimes you can't, and it's not a lack of will or a lack of it's not defiance. It's often that the ADHD brain just cannot access that motivation to do that thing, because we're not motivated by importance. So we need to use what we were talking about yesterday, the 4 kind of things to get dopamine going. We need that in order to be able to do that thing. Otherwise, the brain shuts down. So, for example, I remember many times at school, when I was working in the NHS meetings, I'd be sitting there and I would want to concentrate. I would want to focus on what's happening in the meeting or in the class or whatever. But because I couldn't access the motivation to give me the dopamine to do the listening, I couldn't do it. And however hard I tried, however much I wanted it, that wasn't within my control at that moment. So that's what's important to understand about your kids. It's what's important to understand about you. It's not their fault. It's not your fault. So when you're asking your child to tidy their room, yes, they can maybe do it, or put their shoes on. Yes, they can maybe do it. Physically, they've got the capability. They've been able to do it another time when they've got resource. But at that moment, they need more help. They're going to need to use these tools, the things we talked about yesterday, the dopamine hits, to try and help them to get to that stage. Yes, you can shout at them, you can scare them. That will actually give them a bit of dopamine so that they can do that thing. But long term, that's not going to be very good. It's going to create this sense of, I'm not good enough. That's kind of how the authoritarian parent would do it. And it's also going to create very low self-worth. And that creates lots of problems down the line as well. And then as we move across as well, we've got permissive. So permissive is what gentle parenting is often assumed to be. So that is where we give lots and lots of support, but we have low expectations of our kids. So we don't push them to achieve what they could achieve. We don't support them to achieve what they could achieve. We kind of just do everything for them and just kind of say yes all the time. And that we don't want that either, because that doesn't help our kids' self-esteem at all. And what I've observed, certainly in myself and many of the people I work with, is this kind of pendulum effect. Because if we were raised in a certain way, like certainly on the bottom 2, if we were raised with either of them, then we are likely to that to be our default. We don't expect to be able to have to put in so much support, and actually putting in that kind of support can feel like we're doing it wrong. But then we want to put in the support because we've read the gentle parenting books, and we've read the books that say, we shouldn't punish our kids, we shouldn't bribe our kids and all of that. And so we end up defaulting to the permissive parenting, and we end up kind of massively lowering our expectations, doing everything for our kids, and our kids still say no. And then at that point, we suddenly flip from kind of like, oh, come on, let's do this, la la la, and that's not working. And then we get filled with kind of frustration and rage, and then we pendulum across to authoritarian, and then we shout at our kids, and that actually is what gets the action. So a lot of times I see people who come to me and say, I'm trying to do it right, but the only thing that works, my kids never do anything until I shout at them. And that is that classic pendulum swing. It's like, yeah, they don't listen, they don't listen, they don't listen. And then it's like, once I shout and they know I'm serious, then they do what I'm saying. So yeah, Joanne's saying it sounds familiar. I mean, and that's going to be lots of our experiences a lot of the time. And we're human, and and we are going to shout sometimes because we're human, especially if you're neurodivergent. But what that does is it means that we then get into these patterns of kind of our kids almost waiting until we mean it. And so they're like, well, they don't really mean it yet. They're kind of waiting for us to get to the shouting bit before they do what we're saying, what we want them to do. And that's not terribly helpful. That's not what we really want. We want our kids to be able to do what we want when we ask them, right? We don't want to have to sort of follow this pattern. It's not good for you, and it's not good for your kids. It doesn't feel good for anyone, but it can become a pattern. So what we want to really aim for is this high support and high expectations. So in your workbooks, I've got a few questions in there. I just want you to reflect on what you think your parenting style is and what parenting style you think your parents may have had, and just whether or not they differ. Because if they differ, what you need to know is that whatever you're trying to do here, your default place when you get exhausted, when you're frustrated, when you're out of capacity, when your cup is empty, you're going to default to however you parent it. So that's okay. That's what we do. That's completely natural. But that might be why, Joanne, you're having that pendulum swing from one to the other, because authoritarian is your default. Authoritarian is my default. Authoritarian is probably most of our defaults, to be fair. So when it's not working in the way that we're trying to do it by the book, then we sort of default to authoritarian. So if you know that can be helpful. You can give yourself a bit of a break when it happens. There's a very famous study, I think it was in the 60s, by a guy called Winnicott, and he talks about the concept of good enough parenting. And he says that we don't need to be perfect, we just need to be good enough. So if we're sitting somewhere around the middle of that, the closer we can get to the kind of the pink square, or the closer we can get to sort of over here, the better. But if we're kind of here, or we're dropping down here, that's okay. Or even if we're here, it's okay. We just need to be good enough. We need to aim for good enough. Our kids don't need us to be perfect all the time. And in fact, if we were, then that's giving them massively high standards to try and achieve. I'm going to have a quick look at the chat before I move on. Also, feel free to unmute yourselves if you have anything you want to contribute. I can't actually find my mouse right now. Here we go. Alice, why does shouting work with ADHD kids? Not that I want to shout, but to understand what's going on with motivation. I don't have ADHD. So with ADHD, you're motivated by urgency, novelty, challenge, or interest. Now, I'm assuming there's no interest in them doing the thing, or they do it. There's probably not much challenge there, if it's something standard that they have to do. But when we shout at our kids, it gives them urgency. It makes it like, okay, I've got to do this thing. You're probably not going to get much novelty with shouting either. It's kind of like a scare. It shocks the nervous system, and the nervous system goes, oh shit, right, I need to, now it's serious. Now, the stakes are higher. I need to do this thing. Does that make sense? Sandrine, I used to be authoritarian like my mum, and my husband was permissive. We were both moved to authoritative. Game changer. Yeah, brilliant. And actually, that's interesting because it's often the other way, Sandrine. It's often the male part of the couple, if it's a male-female couple, who is more authoritarian, and the female who's more permissive. So it's actually good that way because it's easier to flip. That makes sense with your husband too. Cool, no worries. Right, okay, let's move on. Okay, so what I'm going to introduce today is something called empathic limits. So if we take the opinion that a child's job is to push the limits to see where the boundary is, like kids in their development, they have different stages of development they need to go through. And the first time we really see this role of the child is when they're 2, and you get the terrible twos. It's not actually the terrible twos, it's the child doing what the child needs to do in order to understand the world around them. They test everything to see what happens. What happens if I drop this plate? Oh, the food falls to the floor and mum gets cross. And, eventually they learn not to do that thing. But they need to see where their boundaries are. And as kids get older and they go through different stages, different sort of developmental stages, again, they need to retest these boundaries to see where they are. If we don't hold boundaries, if we're very permissive or we're uninvolved, then our kids can feel quite unsafe. They can feel like, okay, like where is this boundary? And they're sort of going out further and further to see where it is. Where is this wall that's going to hold me in? Because we need boundaries to feel protected and safe. We need to know what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. So the parent's job, therefore, is to hold the limit, to hold that boundary. And with neurodivergent kids, we might need to be a little more flexible with where that boundary is and when. So the rule might be when you come inside, from outside, you take your shoes off and you put them away. And your child might be able to do that 70% of the time. But when they've had a really hard day at school, when they're having an argument with their sibling in the car and they're coming in, when they've just had a massive meltdown or they're in the middle of the massive meltdown, it's not going to be reasonable for us to hold that boundary if you need to put your shoes away now. It's just not going to be able to happen. And you're going to get into a power struggle. And that would be where I would say pick your battles. This is not the time. Like if they put their shoes away and they follow that rule, 70% of the time, that's great. But I'm guessing that you will all know times when your child might be able to do that and might not be able to do that. So it's having that kind of sense of where your child is at and being able to work with them. And in the program that I teach, as part of the nurture part of the whole structure, we talk a lot about nervous systems and brain and body integration and how you can kind of read your child's nervous system to know where they are and know what their capacity is like. Now, anyone who's worked with me before knows I love an acronym because otherwise I don't remember anything. So for setting empathic limits, I have created the acronym RESET because essentially that's what we're often trying to do when things get tough. Is we want to kind of reset, we want to restart, and we want to do it kind of, let's have a fresh start, fresh slate. Let's take all the shame away from the previous thing that's happened and let's move on. So the first thing we need to do as parents is we need to regulate. And if you remember from day one, we talked about coping. We talked about how important it is to get ourselves calm so that our kids so our kids can kind of match our level. I like to think about it as us being the emotional thermostat as much as possible. So wherever we're holding our emotional energy, everyone else can kind of come to balance to that. So if we're up here, everyone's going to come up here. If we're down here, everyone's going to come down here. If we can stay in the middle, then people will get back to that middle. So what that means is that we need to learn to regulate ourselves. It means we need to look after ourselves. It means we need to have lots of strategies and stuff in place, which is what Roots is about, to be able to regulate ourselves. And that might mean taking ourselves away, calming down, coming back. We don't want to do anything until we're regulated. If it's an emergency, if one child's lamping the other, then okay, you're going to have to get involved. And I would suggest in that case, you separate them into separate places. Try and go to the child who's sort of more vulnerable or the child who's been hit first, because if you go to the one who's doing the hitting, you're going to start they will feel to your nervous system like the enemy and you will not be able to do anything effectively. So go to the one who you're more able to kind of be kind to in that moment. So we regulate. Then we want to empathize and we want to create safety. Because when your child is doing something that they're not supposed to do, when they are having if you remember from, I can't remember which day we talked about flipping your lid now, but when your prefrontal cortex is disengaged and your brain can't kind of focus on what's happening, your thinking brain isn't there, your child needs to have that safety to be able to do anything else. So we need to empathize with them. So even if what they've just lamped their sister, for instance, we come to them and we're like, wow, you must have been so upset to have done that. We're like, what's going on? What's happening for you? We empathize in a way that we know that they're not going to lamp their sister because they think it's fun to their sister, unless they're two. And if they're two, then it's like, it's interesting to know what happens when you hit someone. It really hurts, doesn't it? She was really upset, and you can talk about it like that. But we assume that our child is not coming from a place of maliciousness. Okay, people aren't born. Well, I don't believe that people are born evil. There's things that happen that make people do bad things. So what's underneath it? Let's empathize with what's underneath it and try and create safety for their nervous system so they feel safe, they can relax, they realize they're not going to be told off. And then they get into a state of being able to receive what we're saying. Because if we just go in with, don't hit your sister, they go in, they will match that energy, and they will feel resistant, they will feel reactive, they will want to fight back. They're not learning anything from this moment. They are protecting themselves. However, if we can empathize with where they are and they feel understood, then when we set the limit and we say, we don't hit in this house, hitting hurts, I suggest you have rules, like clearly defined rules about that kind of thing, then you can remind them of the rule. If they're really angry, if you're not able to do that limit setting when they're calm, because often, that calming down will take 3-4 hours, and we need to say, we don't hit, then you want to expect them to take the limit. You want to expect that pushback, because a child's job, if we go back to that, is to see where the boundary is. We've all got neurodivergent kids here, so our kids are not going to be likely to just be like, oh, okay, sorry, not meant to hit, not going to do it again, or, oh yeah, sorry, I meant to put my shoes away. Yeah, sure, I'll go and do it now. I mean, they might, that would be great, but most of the time, I don't imagine you're going to be here if you've got a kid who's like, okay, yeah, sure, mum, sorry, I forgot. They might be like, oh, I'm not doing it, I can't, I'm so tired. And, I get my kid sort of sometimes like crawls along the floor and she's just so exhausted she can't possibly do it. And then she's up doing cartwheels as soon as like the thing has passed. But again, that's then needing dopamine. That's task initiation. It's tough and sometimes it feels too much for them. So expect that test, but you can still hold that limit. So we can empathize with them not wanting to do something. We can be like, I know it feels so tough, but in this house, we all work together as a team, because you don't want your kids to just expect you to do everything for them. That is not great modeling. So, we work together as a team. I know it's tough. Come on, how can we make this easier for you? Or in this house, we are kind to each other. How can we deal with this next time? I mean, if it's the case of hitting, you probably just want to separate them and have this conversation much later when they're calm. So in the case of hitting, I would sort of say you draw a line under the empathize and create safety. You wait until they're calm, which might be 2 to 3 hours, maybe longer, maybe shorter, depending on your child. Then you come back. And this is the next bit. So we tend to the repair. So we want to remind them of the limit. But if you've got a child who's very full of shame, if you've got a child who, as soon as you say, it was tough with your sister earlier, wasn't it? And you got really angry and you wanted to hit her. If they were then going, oh, she did this and she did that, and they're jumping right into sort of the aggression and the like defensiveness. Or if you notice that they're quickly looking away or they're trying to change the subject, that suggests that they've got a lot of shame. So we want to set the limit quickly with empathy and move through to the next bit, because they're going to need to do lots of processing to get that shame, to work through that shame. And again, like, I can't go into all of that today, but the thing that you really want to get them doing with your empathy, if possible, is crying. You want them to cry about the fact that it's hard with their sister. You know, why have they hit their sister? Is there sibling rivalry going on? Do they resent their sister being here because the sister takes all of your attention? Even if that's not true, like, you know, on the great scheme of things, if you divvy up all the time that you spend with each child, you probably spend it with the one who's often lamping the sister. But in their mind, maybe they had them to you to themselves prior to the sister coming along or something. And then it's like, okay, right, this feels like the sister is here taking me away. So they need to grieve that, and we need to create that space for them to grieve that thing, which is creating this other thing. Sometimes it's not that complex, but normally if you look below the surface of the behaviors that are repeated, whether it's aggression, whether it's like swearing about something, or saying really awful things, or smashing things up, like, normally beneath the surface of all that is a core reason, and it's normally something to do with them not feeling safe. So that's why that creating safety thing is so important. Okay, I'm just going to have a look at the chat, and I'm going to go to the repair. Right, so don't worry, Jules, you can catch it on catch up. You always jump in and do it because it's quicker, not hitting. I mean, picking up rubbish or something. Yeah, exactly. And often we do, right? And I think it's important to state that what I'm giving you here is theoretical, and if you're working with me one-on-one, we talk much more about kind of where you would sort of jump in and where you wouldn't. I would suggest, if that is something that you find hard, and I'm with you on that because I find that really hard too. My husband's much better at holding the limits about, like, right, you know, he started the shoe rule in our house, for instance. I would have just been like, whatever, like, I'll just clear it up after them. But it helps, right? And they're learning a really good skill there through that. He also insists that they clear up before they go to bed, and I sometimes don't, because I know that's going to add half an hour to our getting upstairs to bed, because it's such an effort to get them to do that tidying up. So we pick our battles, right? And we sometimes don't notice the thing that's not being done because it's in our interest not to notice it. But I would suggest that you find a few small things that you're not going to budge on. And again, I say that loosely because we need to be flexible in terms of if our child does not have the capacity in that moment. I would think around 70% of the time they should be able to do this thing, and 30% of the time you're just going to let it go. But yeah, something small, something like you take your plate to the sink or to the dishwasher after eating a meal. Like, that is something that most kids can do most of the time. And there'll be a few times when it doesn't happen, but most of the time they'll be able to do it. And what that does, and yeah, as they get older, obviously that's gonna become more, right? You're going to get them to, you know, clear the table or lay the table or do the washing up, whatever it is. But, you know, start small. Start with something manageable for your kid. Your child's 3, isn't she? So he or she. So I think, you know, taking the plate to the dishwasher, putting the shoes away, that kind of thing, that all seems quite manageable. But choose one thing. Yeah, maybe just start with one thing and stick to it. And really, like, so you're training yourself to sit in those difficult moments when your child doesn't want to do it, and you're saying, come on, this is what we do. And you're going to have to go all in with play and with, like, encouragement and cheerleading, and it's going to feel ridiculous because you could so easily just pick that plate up and take it to the sink. But actually, by you're giving yourself the gift of feeling successful, feeling like they can do something. And then when their friends come round, or when their grandparents come round, and they just get up and take their plate to the dishwasher, guess what? Everyone's going to be like, wow, you take your plate to the dishwasher without even being asked. That's amazing. And they feel so great. And that's the beauty of some of this stuff, right? It really makes our kids feel successful. And it means that you don't have to spend your life tidying. So your youngest is like that. Surely the eldest should feel more rejected as she came first. Well, yeah, that would probably have been the case. That's kind of like the typical case with sibling rivalry. But if your youngest is yeah, has different wiring, if they're more sensitive, if they need you more, if they're neurodivergent, if there's so many different things, right? So we need to delve into what's happening there for them. I'm using sibling rivalry as a kind of classic example of what I see all the time, but there's many, many other reasons that could create that situation. It could just be jealousy, right? The child who finds it easier, who has an easier ride, is normally a child who's just what Dr. Ross Green calls kind of lucky, because their reactions when they do something that is challenging, like when they're upset, when something's not going their way, their way of showing that, their way of expressing that to the world is something that we as parents or we as adults find easier to deal with. So maybe they cry or they whine. If you've got a disposition where you shout and you scream and you get aggressive, then that is unlucky, right? You're unlucky to have that disposition because it's not received so well. So if you have a child who I have a child who has a lucky disposition and an unlucky disposition. And, life is much harder for my child with an unlucky disposition because that is her go-to. It's my go-to too. I get it. I am much more likely to just fly off the handle in a way that's much less acceptable to people. It feels much more difficult to handle. Cool. Yeah. So that's resonating with you, Jules. I'm glad. So let's talk about repair, because of course all of what I've said, all very nice and sweet and whatever, but how does your child learn what's right from wrong, blah, 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 right? If we do this, I can guarantee you that they actually know, before any of this has happened, what's right from wrong, right? They know their hitting their sister isn't right. They know they're meant to put their shoes away. But they can't learn or do anything if they are in a position of fight, right? So if their nervous system's kind of going, oh, I'm in trouble, they're going to just convince themselves that they've not done anything wrong, or try and convince you. And in trying to convince you, they're going to be sort of sitting there, almost convincing themselves. If we send our kids up to their room because they've been naughty, are they sitting in their room pondering what they've done wrong and thinking, oh, I wish I'd done it differently? No, they're sitting there thinking how horrible and mean you are and how nobody gets them and how they're going to get out of being in trouble. So instead of doing that, if we can follow these steps, and then when we've done the sort of setting the limit and expecting the test, then we tend to the repair. And we say to our kids, okay, so, it was a really hard moment, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I know you know that it's not okay to hit your sister. So what can we do to put it right? What would make you feel better if you've been hit? Because it doesn't feel nice to be hit, does it? And, maybe she's hurting, or maybe she's feeling really sad and like you hate her. What could you do? And it might be that they, at that moment, can't do anything. And that means that you've jumped in too early. So sometimes, particularly with my child, I sometimes have to wait a day or two before I do this repair. And so I don't do repairs with everything. I do repairs with the big things. But often, if it is a situation of like somebody's got hurt, but it's not massively escalated, when they've done the thing and you see their face, it's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I can say, oh no, this has all gone wrong. Quick, grab an ice pack. And the child who's done the hurting will run and grab an ice pack and bring it back. And then by doing that, they are already making a repair, right? They're already trying to make things better. So when we use ice packs way too much in our house, we use ice packs for tiny little scratches, because that is what my kids have learned is a way to show that they want to make it right. So, I mean, I get given ice packs all the time and I'm always cold and I'm like, guys, seriously, I don't need an ice pack. If anything, can you go and make me a hot water bottle? That's going to make me feel better. But actually, I don't want you using the kettle and a hot water bottle. But yes, like things like that, or making a little card, writing a little note. It could just be saying sorry. But what I encourage you to do is not say to your child, say sorry to your sister, because that's then an empty sorry. If they come up with it and they're like, sorry, or it might feel too hard to say sorry, so they might say something like, do you want to play blah blah? Or they might go and bring them a toy. It's important to know what your child does and notice when they're trying to make that repair. Because I often see, for instance, my daughter trying to make a repair with my husband, who's still so cross that he misses it. And she'll go and try and like do a little dance with him, or try and make a joke, or she does this like silly little bum wiggle thing. And if he misses it, then that's completely lost. And then she goes into this kind of like, he hates me, because she's tried with everything she's got. And the sorry's just too hard to say. And as adults, we're not good at saying sorry. And the way that we can get our kids to say sorry, the best way to do it is to model it ourselves. So we need to be apologizing to them when we get it wrong. We need to be apologizing to each other. We need to be showing them that, and they will pick it up, I promise you. Right, I'm just going to check in the chat. Yeah, Elena, I love that. Yeah, I use that a lot. Yeah, prove me wrong, all of that. And the crowd is chanting, and yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. I love that. Cool. Okay, right. Any questions on any of that? Oh, okay, move on. Right, there's a little exercise in your workbook that you can have a think about. I've given an example here, but obviously, depending on the age of your kids, there's going to be, this is probably not going to work for all of your kids. So think about something where your child is refusing to do something or has done something where you need to set a limit. So you can probably just think about this morning or last night. I don't want you to think about something major, but just any little thing where you might need to set a limit. And I want you to, in the workbook, I've got the reset acronym in there and all the bits, so you can refer to it. So think about what an empathic limit would look like, what steps you would take, and how it would look like in that situation. And then write out, and you might want to do this later, how you could validate your child's emotions while you hold that boundary. And I want to open this up to working through this with somebody if anyone wants to, if anyone's a bit stuck on like, well, how can I empathize with this situation, or how could I hold a boundary here? So if anyone has an example that they want to work through, feel free to unmute yourself or pop it in the chat and we can have a think about it. Anyone want to work through anything, or is this all making sense? Go for it, Kate. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to work through something. So we have trouble getting our son out of the house in the morning. He's 10, so we're lucky enough that he can go round the corner to the school by himself, and he really likes that independence and pushes for it. But both of us want to start work, and we're both kind of waiting for him to get his stuff together and leave the house. So we've been trying to make him more responsible for that process. But he'll do things like get dressed, have his breakfast, and then go back to bed. And then if challenged, he'll say, well, I am ready, I'm dressed, I've had my breakfast. But the point is he's not putting his shoes on and leaving the house. So we've done things like set an alarm so he knows what time he could leave. So it's about encouraging that independence and maybe looking at the parenting styles, maybe we're expecting too much in terms of thinking that he could leave the house or be ready to leave the house at the right time. Maybe our expectations are too high, and we need to, we have to be supportive.
And there's a great form of parenting.
We'd like to get to a stage where, particularly as he goes to high school, duct tape parenting. This autumn, we'd like to get to a stage where
the concept is
we don't
this woman was just like so fed up of shouting at her kids that she literally duct taped her mouth shut, and she was like, "I'm not going to tell you what to do anymore." And they had to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
What you could, I mean, you're already giving him lots of independence, which is great, and he's getting up and he's getting dressed, and then he's getting back into bed. So I guess what we need to do is, I've got a morning routine thing that I've set up for probably slightly younger kids, to be honest. But I don't need to adjust it much for older kids. I sent Claire yesterday I thought I had a morning one, but it was actually an afternoon one. But I'm going to create a morning one for kind of the sort of tween years, I guess, and upwards. I mean, it can be used by adults too. Just to help them think through that process themselves. So you can do it with him to work out the timings, etc. But then, I mean, you don't have to do it with this template. But what you could do is sort of sit down with a piece of paper and go, okay, right. So you need to leave the house at this time. And you're doing so well, aren't you? You're able to get dressed. You're able to have breakfast. And then you go back to bed. And then it gets really tricky because I don't want to shout at you. You don't want me to shout at you, but you need to get to school because school starts at a certain time. So I've noticed we've got a problem here. How can we fix it? How can we work through it? And if you literally just have a blank sheet of paper and just start writing ideas down. So either he writes it or you write it, or you both have a pen and you both write bits. But you could come up with some silly ideas to get him laughing and kind of release any anxiety, but also some more sensible ones as well. And I bet you he will come up with the answer that is actually going to work. And you might have to keep trying things, but some things, for instance, might be, I don't know if you've got like Alexas or anything like that. You could set like an Alexa alarm to sort of say, I don't know, 15 minutes till you need to leave for school. And then maybe you could have a song that plays that's like that he loves. It's like a really motivating song that comes on as he needs to get his shoes on and leave the door. And that kind of might leave him pumped and become a bit of a like routine. That might work quite well for an ADHD brain. What I'd encourage you to think about, and when you do this with him, is on that sheet of paper, I would write down the 4 big dopamine hitters. So urgency, novelty, challenge, and interest. Which of those 4 things can he use to get himself out the door and get him thinking about it in terms of those 4 things? So how can I use these? How can I help my brain to do this? And if you do that in a really supportive way, like, I've done this class, they taught me about these 4 things that you can get dopamine from. How can we work together? How can we make this work for you? Like, this is a bit that's really tricky, and I get it. You want to get back into bed. Like, God, who doesn't? Like, when I got up for the gym this morning, and I was so tired, and I had like 5 hours sleep all this week. It's been horrendous. And when I got back from the school run, because I got back from the gym, took the kids to school, and it was about 9, and I was like, I just want to go back to bed. And I couldn't, right? Because I've got to show up here, and I want to do this too. But gosh, the temptation to get back into my bed when I went into my room earlier was just huge because it's cozy and it's warm and I'm tired. Of course he is too, and he's a teenager or a tween, and their brains are not wired to work with the school times. Like, I do not understand why secondary school is at the times it is, because the teenage brain is wired to go to sleep later and wake up later. So it just doesn't make any sense. So they're already working against themselves. So of course he wants to go back to bed. So I'd really go in with the empathy on that. And you can even tell him that, your brain wants to go back to bed. Like, your body wants you to go back to bed. Nature wants you to go back to bed. Doesn't make any sense. It's really rubbish that school starts at this time. But it does, and we can't do anything about it. And quite frankly, neither of us want to go to prison, and it's the law, so we're going to have to make this work. You can be jokey about it, but you can also be like, you know what, it is the law. Like, I don't really want to go to jail. I mean, you're not going to go to jail, of course, but like, you can sort of bring that in as like, this is quite serious. And actually, if you want to go to secondary school and be independent and go on your own and do all that stuff, this is your year to prove that you're actually able to do it. And you could think about some incentives. So, like, a week of going independently on his own without being asked. Maybe there can be like a little reward that he's earning, and you could have like a little like tick chart or something where he's kind of going, yeah, I've managed it. To be honest with you, with like a tick chart or something, the dopamine's coming from like doing the tick rather than the thing. The thing is just like the thing that makes him want to do the tick, but the thing doesn't need to be very big. I don't tend to really like reward charts, but I think it can sometimes work short term to get a bit of a dopamine hit. But I wouldn't necessarily suggest it. I would see if he suggests that. It might just be like a song and a routine and that structure and those neurotypical ideas that the neurodivergent brain just doesn't have. Like, my husband's always saying stuff to me, and I'm like, "That's genius!" Like, and he's just like, "What do you mean it's genius? It's just like what you do." And I'm like, "Really? I never considered that. Like doing. I can't even think of an example now, but there's so many things just in life." He's just like, well, if you just leave your keys on the hook by the door, then they'll always be there. And I'm like, oh yeah. Like, then I don't need to try and find my keys. And it's like, of course, that makes a lot of sense, but it never occurred to me to take them out of my coat pocket. And then, of course, when I take them out of my coat pocket when I'm upstairs, I never know where they are. So having a place, it's stuff that everybody knows, right? But it doesn't occur to it certainly doesn't occur to my brain. Good luck at the dentist, Jules. Hope it doesn't hurt. Right. Does that make sense, Kate? Go with it. Go with it. So encourage his creativity.
That
He
makes
might come
sense.
up with some crazy
I'm
things.
always a bit
What you
nervous
do,
asking
right, is
for
you
his
write your list,
suggestions because
and then
he
you
thinks he's an
you get like
entrepreneur,
loads
an
of ideas.
inventor,
So
and
painting
his
himself
suggestions
blue,
might
getting a
use
drone, all
like
of
a
that,
drone
brilliant. Get them on the
or a herd
list,
of sheep
and then
or
you can
like
start to like go through them and be
dressing
like, and I
backwards
want you
or
to come up with
like
some
painting
ideas that are
himself
ridiculous
blue.
as well, right?
What do you do
Like if
about
you can
like
come up with some really
inappropriate
silly ones
suggestions?
too. And then you can go through and be like, okay, right, well, it's painting yourself blue is, you just don't quite see how this is going to get you to school on time. Is that meeting the things that we need to do? You're getting the novelty there. It's a challenge, perhaps, to do it without getting paint all over the carpet. Maybe you're planning to paint the carpet too. Definitely interesting, but I guess what we're trying to do here is get you from your bed to school. I don't see how blue is going to help that. So I think we're going to have to cross that one off. Let's look at the next one. And you can just kind of do it like that. Do it in a sort of jokey way. But he might come up with something that seems ridiculous to you that works for him. So, it might be, I don't know if he's got a drone thingy, but like maybe he has to fly the drone to school above his head to track the fact that he's going. Or maybe he flies the drone to school like while he's lying in bed, and then it comes back, and then he knows the way that he's going to go, and then he goes to school and follows it. Like, obviously that is not going to make it any quicker, but if that helps him do it, then fine, go with it, right? And then you can go like, okay, let's try this for a week, and then we're going to review it at the end of the week, see if there's any improvements we can make, see if we need to make any adjustments. And this is, I think, where people go wrong all the time, is you forget to do that bit. So if you do the bit of like, okay, right, so we've done this for 3 days, we've done this for 5 days. How many days did it work? How many days did it not work? What bits did we get stuck on, and what can we change? By being like consistent with that, and you're neurotypical, aren't you, Kate? So you might find it a bit easier to do this. Are you neurotypical? You are, yeah. So yeah, for me as an ADHD mum, I find it really hard to do that each time and have that consistency because I lose interest. but but if you're not ADHD, then you might find it easier to than I would anyway, to kind of just check in every week and just be like, okay, like how's it going? How's it going? And if you can do that for like 2-3 weeks,
Yes, I am. Yeah.
you might find that he's able to do this for himself. And of course, it's going to have to change as he gets older and as the novelty of the sending the drone to school or whatever he ends up doing wears off. He might need to find something new, but you can just help him to try and work with his brain to find a new way to do that. Cool. Someone once told me that after you empathize with its tough rubbish,
Yeah.
you need to go to school, etc. It's better to say, and
Yeah.
it's the law, you still need to go to school instead of but. Yeah, absolutely. But it's a really negative word. And it sounds like, yeah, we're sort of saying, your feelings aren't important. So, and if you use and, it can be more powerful. I would say though,
That's useful. Thank you.
don't get too stuck up on head up on language, because I don't think our kids necessarily notice them as much as the people who write the books do. I do think and is better, but if you're saying but, don't rewind yourself and be like, I mean but, because your kids are going to see right through that. Like we don't need to parent to scripts. If you can use and, that's great, but I wouldn't. It's probably the least important thing in the great scheme of things. If you can empathize and set your limit, then whether you use and or but is not going to make a huge difference, but it will make a difference. It is better to use and. I do agree with that. Okay, I've just got a few things here just to kind of give you a few ideas for how you can sort of find ways to make this work. So win-wins. So as I was talking about with Claire, that would be a win-win. You're working it out together, you're problem solving, you're finding a win-win. He gets out the door on time and he's not being shouted at. So supports all of you. Meeting the deeper need. So looking at the deeper need behind the thing that they're refusing to do or the thing that they're doing that you don't want them to do. Is there a physical, an emotional, a mental, or a spiritual need beneath what they're doing? Redirecting. So rather than saying, don't do this, don't do that, try and tell them what they can do instead. So instead of don't hit your sister, wow, you're feeling angry, why don't you hit the sofa? Give them something else that they can do. And then routine. So like I was just talking to Kate about, creating a sort of morning routine where there's a structure that you agree on, you write it down, you work through it together, and then you sort of implement it. You might write it up somewhere in a routine so it's very clear what to do. That can help avoid power struggles, because then you get on the same side as your child rather than kind of working against each other. You'll no longer shout at your kid to get to school. You're saying, oh, well, what does the routine say? How can I support you to get through your routine? Okay. This I have put in your workbook so you can look through it. But there's some other alternatives to get your kids to do what you need them to do without punishing them. So I've got stop, drop and breathe. This is something that comes from Dr. Laura Markham. It's just a really good regulation tool. So if we stop what we're doing, we drop our agenda and we breathe. So drop our agenda just for a moment, okay, I'm going to stop making dinner. I'm going to stop doing my emails, whatever it is that your head's in. That's not important for this minute. I'm stopping what I'm doing. I'm dropping the urgency of things that I think I need to do. I'm going to take a deep breath, calm myself down, and then respond rather than just reacting. You can use play. I've seen that in the chat quite a lot. Reconnecting, so finding a way to reconnect with them in the moment so that you can then get them to feel safe, connected to you, and then they're much more likely to work with you. Empathizing and recognizing what's happening for them, valuing them, redirecting them to something that they can do, or redirecting them to something else that, distracting them with a different option. That's probably more for younger kids. Expressing your feelings and asking for help. So this can be quite powerful. So if we say something like, I'm getting really worried that we're going to be late. Please, can you help me by getting your shoes on. It's better than, we're going to be late, you need to get your shoes on. You know, I'm getting frustrated. I'm feeling really overwhelmed with all of this noise. It would really help me right now if people can use some quieter voices or go into a different room. Or I know you guys are having fun right now, and sometimes fun looks like bickering, but it's really sending my nervous system jangling. Can we turn this into a different kind of play? Can we start, like, how about we do a family dance or something? That will be redirecting and using your own needs. We don't want to make our kids responsible for our needs, but we can show them how their behavior can impact others in a helpful way. So if we can do that, that's great really for like things where you're asking them to do something. So if you want them to get out of bed and go to school, it makes me really anxious because I know you need to go to school and I need to start my day. And when you're in bed, I know that you know that you need to go to school and you've probably got it all in your head and you're sorted and you know that you're going to get there on time. And it must be really annoying for you that I then shout at you. But I'm so anxious that I end up having to shout at you because I'm so worried that you're not going to make it. So can you help me by telling me what your plan is and when you're going to leave? And can we have an agreement that I know what you're going to do too, so I don't need to shout at you? Could be a way to kind of phrase that. I've talked about telling what they can do. Give them choices. So you can do this or this rather than don't do that. When you're ready, so if you're not in a rush, you could say something like, when you're ready to put on your shoes, when you're ready to brush your teeth, when you're ready to whatever the thing is, then we can do whatever the thing is that they want to do. You can give them fantasy. So if your child is, this works particularly well if they're young, but it can work with kids as well. If your child really wants something and you're saying no, you can't have a sweet, you can't have a cookie, you can't go to your friend's party, you can't stay up until midnight, you can give them the idea of what it would be like in fantasy. So I bet when you are an adult and you can decide what time you go to bed, you're going to go to bed at 4 a.m. every day. You're going to be able to choose whenever you go to bed. Maybe you'll stay up all night and sleep all day. You can give them that idea in fantasy, and that actually does help them to then accept the reality because they've got a dose of what they wanted. So when you've done this, then you can do that. That's the kind of other version of the when you're ready. And then the final one, addressing the underlying need. So, what is underlying the behaviour? Need that. No worries, Sandrine, I'll see you soon. Right, okay. So just before I announce the prizes and stuff, I just want to tell you about my new program I'm releasing. So I did this very last minute last night, and it's probably, it didn't even work. Maybe it didn't save. Oh no, I think I have to, no, that's not working either. No, my goodness. It did sort of work. Right. So the first thing you get within it is you get a roadmap call with me, and you get one-to-ones. So it's a 6-month-long program, and you get one-to-ones every other week. And before we do that, we do a roadmap. We look at what's going on in your family, where you want to get to, and we figure out all the different bits of the Growing Extraordinary Humans framework, where you are with each of them, and what you need to learn, and where you need to kind of build on that. You then get from that a bespoke parent education tailored to your family. So I have my sort of foundation course. I also will be creating different units for the individuals that I'm working with to meet their specific needs, so that the education library grows essentially and they get what they need. So if you're working with me and you need to look at a specific thing that I haven't covered in my course, I will create that education unit for you as well. I give you all the different education bits in an order that works for you based on your priorities. You're You also get access to monthly expert workshops, which are part of my Roots and Nurture membership. So far, they've only just launched, so we've only got 2 in there at the moment, but they're brilliant. So we've had Nicole Bateman coming and talking to us about sensory processing and how meeting a child's sensory needs can help with behaviour. She was in the House of Lords a couple of weeks ago talking to them. Like she's just fantastic. She really knows her stuff. Last month we had Julia, I can't pronounce the surname, so I'm not even going to try, talking to us about autism and PDA. And again, that was a fantastic session. This month we've got Michelle Henning, who is also a parent coach who we trained with, and she's a nutrition specialist as well. And she's going to talk to us about gut health and creating healthy meals for your kids that support their gut, but that aren't overcomplicated, that can work in an ADHD household where your kids might be fussy eaters or where you might be just really too busy to do anything complicated. In the following month, we've got a expert in sleep, neurodivergent sleep. So she's a neurodivergent sleep consultant. We've got somebody talking about DLA and how you can use DLA for your family, and loads of other people lined up as well. So those expert workshops keep coming, and there's also a back library of them which you get access to as well. And you also get that if you join the Nurture or the Roots membership. And then you get the Growing Extraordinary Humans community as well. So that is in both of the memberships. Do I have a date for the guest expert session? I do, and I think it's in the Facebook group there, but I will check in the Growing Extraordinary Humans one. So that's a great point. So we've got, for anyone in the Roots or the Nurture membership, there is a separate Facebook group where we have our monthly group coaching sessions. In Nurture, we have weekly ones as well. And there's a Facebook community, which is really supportive. It's full of parents with ADHD, without ADHD. All of them have ADHD kids. And actually, lots of people in that group are also experts in their fields and are really helpful. So we've got Sandrine, who's just left, who is going to do something for us on nutrigenomics. We've got Claire here, who's a psychologist and does lots of stuff around well-being in the workplace. We've got somebody who specialises in creating mental health resources for anxious kids. So we've got lots of people within the group as well, so everyone can sort of support each other, which is just fab. So the Growing Extraordinary Humans programme that I'm promoting, I've got 3 spots for, is a 6-month programme with one-to-ones every other week. And then the intervening week, you do a bit of the parent education, whatever thing I have given you to do. The time investment is probably about an hour a week. So you've got an hour a week for the one-to-one, and then the following week you'd spend about an hour on the parent education. So I've done it so it's quite manageable. There's other stuff you can build on if you want more. There's loads of other resources I can give you, but the hour a week is what will sort of shift the dial. And I sort of guarantee to people at the beginning of the roadmap call, we will have a discussion about where you want to go, where you want to get to in your family, what changes you need to see made, what your sort of good and your sort of ideal scenario is. We'll agree on a goal, and then I guarantee that we're going to get you to that goal within the 6 months. And if we don't get you to that goal, then you don't pay me anymore. I keep working with you until we get you there. I'm confident we will get you there, but if we don't within that time frame, then I continue working with you. And then there's also, so that's £2,500 for the 6 months, and there's also a payment plan that I can offer as well. So if anyone is interested in that, I'm very happy to jump on a call with you. We can do a roadmap call as to see if it feels right. So I don't want people to jump on roadmap calls if they're not considering it at all. But if it feels like something that you are interested in, maybe you need to bring your partner in to see if they like working with me, and if it feels like something that's going to work for your family, then you can book a roadmap call. There's no pressure to sign up for the whole thing. But they take me between 60 and 90 minutes, generally 90 minutes to do a roadmap call. So, if you know that it's not something for you, then please don't book one. But if you would like to book one and you think that, this is something that you might seriously consider, or maybe the nurture membership, then I'm very happy to do one with you. So drop me a message either on Facebook or an email, and I will send you a link to book one of those calls. I also have, I think we've got a few people in here who are in various bits of my membership. So we've got the nurture membership, which is £57 a month at the moment. That is going to be £57 a month. It's going to stay at £57 a month for anyone who's in, and anyone who joins before Monday evening. I'll probably say midnight on Monday, actually. If you let me know before midnight on Monday that you want to join, then I will give you that sort of £57 a month price. And for that, you get the expert workshops, you get the community, and you get weekly group coaching with me. And it's a really nice, smallish group at the moment. It will grow, but at the moment, it's a really nice, small group. So you get quite a lot of access to me in that. With the Roots membership, that's only £10. And again, that I've been sort of told that is just ridiculous value. It is ridiculous value, really, for what you're getting in it. But also, I think people don't know how good it is because of how cheap it is. So I am going to raise the price of that as well. For anyone who's in there at the moment or joins before Monday at midnight, it's going to stay at just £10 a month. And after that, it's going to increase probably to £15. I haven't quite figured it out yet. But for that, you get a monthly group coaching with me, and you get the guest expert workshops plus the community. So yes, that is that. So just drop me messages if you want them. The Roots one, I think you can just sign up to. There's a link which I'll send to people later. If you want to access my website, you can just scan that QR code there. And I need to announce the prizes. So who have I got? So for day 2, for the input I had on day 2, I want to give, and actually for emailing me first thing this morning, I don't know if she's still on the call. She was here earlier. She is. Emailing me early to let me know that come on brain, that I missed I sent you all an email this morning saying that it was tomorrow, and actually it was today. I was just writing it last night. My brain has just died towards the end of this presentation, as you can see, and towards the end of this week, because I haven't had any sleep. But I'm going to give the first prize to Vix. So congratulations, Vix. You are going to get a month in the Nurture membership. So that's a £57 a month membership. So you can get a group call with us every week for the next month. And you also get the Growing Extraordinary Humans program for a month. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Within Nurture, you also get the Growing Extraordinary Humans program. So Vix, I will send all of that to you after this. I am going to give the next prize to Sarah, who's not here. She's done every one of these. Sarah Hankey has done every one of these in the evening afterwards, because she's always been busy or working. But she's very, very committed, and she's been in all the chats and talking about all of the threads and been really, really engaged. So I've been really impressed with her. So I am going to give that one to her. And for the last person engaging wise, let me just have a look at my list. So sorry, I didn't say what Sarah's getting. Sarah is getting a 30-minute one-to-one with me. And the last person, so that I was going to give this to Claire for all of the engagement that you've done, Claire, but the prize was going to be a month in Roots, but you've already in Roots. So I will have to figure out what I'm going to give you. I might give you either another half an hour one-to-one or a month in Nurture. You can decide which one you want. Let me know. Email me afterwards and let me know which one you would like. And I think that is it. Oh, I just need to give you guys your bonus. So the bonus that I'm going to give you today is going to be the How Not to Fuck Up Your ADHD Kids workshop. So this is a paid workshop. It's currently £27 to buy at any point. I'm going to give that to everybody who came live. It's a really good workshop. It just basically gives you the... I don't know if anyone on here has done this. Did you do that one, Claire? No, you didn't. Cool. Okay, good. So it'll be new to most of you. But yeah, it basically covers where the pitfalls are when you've got an ADHD kid, how things can get really difficult for your child, where things can go south quite quickly, and what you can do to sort of boost them. And that covers some slightly different stuff from what we've done today as well. So I hope you have found that helpful. Do get in touch with me if you've got any other questions, if you want to explore working with me in any way. All of the workshops and stuff are going to be up on the Facebook group until Monday at midnight as well, and then they're going to go. So do try and catch up with it before Monday. And if you're interested in one of the memberships, do try and get into one of them before the end of Monday as well. And for the program, there isn't a time limit as such, but I do only have 3 spaces, and I'm already speaking to somebody tomorrow who's very seriously interested, and I've got another couple of people who want to book calls with me as well. So if you want that, do try and book on a call as soon as you can. So drop me a message and we can book that up. Thank you so much, guys. Don't forget to jump on the Facebook thread and let us know what you got from this session. And I'd really appreciate any feedback, testimonials, etc., because that just really helps me get this message out to more people. Take care, guys. Lovely to see you.
Brilliant. Thank you.